Hello and welcome back to this episode of Betting People with Matthew Shaddick of Smarkets. We're going to look at some industry issues now and basically how the political betting industry has grown. I was talking in the first episode about how we've seen an explosion in recent decades, and I wanted to ask, over the course of your career, just how much has political betting grown?
I can remember when I first sort of took on this job, it was really just a part-time hobby to go along with my actual job at Ladbrokes at the time, which was more sort of horse racing focused. There wasn't a great deal of enthusiasm for very many people in the rest of the trading department, as I remember, although my boss at the time was Patrick Jay, who's actually the grandson of Jim Callahan, and he was super supportive, as were most of the other trading directors I worked under. And we had a very good group of PR colleagues who were very much behind it. It grew from something really just tiny. It was mostly a PR-led exercise to try and get the brand's name in the papers. No expectation you could possibly win any money doing it. So the fact that we turned it into a sort of a legitimate product, where we, by the end of it, were expecting to at least break even, if not better, on the major events. The swings, if Trump had won last year, had Trump beaten Biden, there would have been a sort of £15 million swing in terms of profit for loss for Entain. So that's a pretty big deal. It's very rare that even big companies like Entain will have that much of a swing on the outcome of one thing, never mind one election. Even one horse race or soccer match or whatever, you never get those, or you very, very rarely would get those sorts of swings. Of course, you can lose a lot of money if all the favourites come in one Saturday. So it became quite a big deal, and I think in terms of what we did for the brand there and the help we gave to our sort of comms colleagues, I think it was a really, really good exercise.
Now, you've moved to Smarkets, which is an exchange-based platform, and obviously they're not the only exchange in town, but that part of the industry is growing too. And I was just wondering, in your opinion, how many exchanges do you think the market would support? You have Smarkets, Betfair, and Betdac, and there are other sort of peer-to-peer platforms too.
Yeah. I wouldn't think very many more. Even our company, the exchange is what the main products we've been running for the last few years here, but we do have a sportsbook now as well, SBK, and that's where we're imagining most of the growth might come from in the future, because the nature of exchanges, as the market has found out, is that they're a sort of, I wouldn't necessarily say niche, but they certainly put off a lot of casual bettors, because there's some terminology and different interface to get your head around, as opposed to the fixed odds product most people are familiar with. So I think if there's going to be any growth in the sort of exchange area, it's going to be in a different space altogether. It's going to be crypto stuff, where you can, in theory, get around the sort of national regulations by setting up your blockchain-based prediction market somewhere, and there's some of those are already turning over quite a bit of money. But in terms of your the regulated business like the one that Smarkets is in, I can't imagine there's going to be too many more.
Now, moving to a different tack here, but for anybody who might be interested in either getting into the political betting industry, as niche as it might sound, or just setting their own political odds, do you have any tips for somebody looking to do that?
I can think of a couple of things. I think one really useful thing is actually to be able to code or at least build models, because that's an area of expertise which everybody wants in the whole of the betting industry, and obviously lots of other industries too, so it's a good thing to fall back on. But if you could turn up and start building, a model to price up constituencies at a UK general election, that'd be marvellous. Lots of people would like to employ you if you could do that. And I think the other thing is just to try and write something. If you want to start up a blog or something and just start writing stuff about your predictions, make the odd tip that people could compare reality to in the future. They'd be two things I'd start to do if I wanted to get into this sort of thing.
An industry-wide issue, which isn't just in political betting, is winning punters, winning accounts being limited or banned.
Yes.
Do you think that there's a better alternative for the industry? I ask you as a man who's been on the other side of it. And do you have that, or did you ever come across that in your target entertaining political betting?
The first thing I'm going to say here is that doesn't really apply to Smarkets very much. We do have, I mean, if you hit a couple of milestones on the exchange about how much you win or how many trades you make in a particular time, you will end up paying more commission, which you might argue is the same thing. But we don't have a team of people who are scrutinising every account to try and, as it will, weed out the ones we think are going to be unprofitable on the sort of sports book, unless you happen to hit one of these milestones, which only a very small selection of customers would do. Thinking back to my time at Entain, for instance, what I would say is that the people who are in charge of that sort of client profiling part of the business are mostly pretty clever people who've got a lot of experience of the betting industry, really understand what they're doing. They're not just restricting people because they happen to have backed a couple of winners, or even that they happen to be ahead even after quite a long period of time. That doesn't mean you necessarily get restricted. These people know what they're doing, they've got very good analytical tools. I can guarantee you they are very, very good at identifying accounts which are likely to be unprofitable for their organisation. Now once you've done that, the question is, well, why wouldn't you, as a operator, seek to minimise the losses you're going to take against these accounts you've identified? Of course, the people on the other side, the customers who are, in some cases, pursuing some kind of arbing strategy, or they've got some bots which can find inefficiencies in people's prices, or they're just backing bad each-way races in Ireland or whatever it is. I don't think they're doing anything wrong or unethical in trying to exploit those edges they've found. But they're acting perfectly rationally. Of course, the operators are acting perfectly rationally in saying, we don't particularly want to take this custom. They certainly don't have any legal obligation to do that. And I don't particularly think they've got any ethical obligation either. Now, it's Smarkets, of course, if you're running an exchange and a sportsbook where we're trying to offer, a very low margin product, low commission product to as many people as possible, doing that and also paying out potentially millions of pounds to a small number of very sharp accounts, or that's not easy. In order to try and maintain that exchange ecosystem, as other exchanges have done, you end up, asking, the big winners to pay more commission. Some of them will, some of them will simply stop because it doesn't become it's not profitable anymore for them to do so. So no matter how much we'd like it just to be some big free market where supply and demand can just look after itself, the reality of these sort of platforms is that's actually pretty difficult to do that and still, make a profit essentially.
And have you found that in political betting or in any of those terms, you've had situations where quite a few people were, say, limited from that book, saw therefore and couldn't get what they wanted on elections, etc.?
I think it would be very, very rare for people to get restricted just because of activity they've conducted on political markets. I'm not saying that's never happened, I'm sure it has. It doesn't happen all that often. If they did, it would probably be because they were simply, or at least they were mainly, just arbing our prices against some other platform somewhere continually and doing nothing else, in which case that might happen. From the Smarkets point of view, one of the reasons we host as many political markets and current affairs markets as we do is actually a desire to produce something useful on our platform other than just a vehicle for people to have a bet on the football or whatever, because we see our sort of future as being somewhere where people will visit our site, not necessarily place a bet, but if they actually want to know the real probability, or at least the best estimate of the probability of something happening in the future, like, I don't know, some piece of government legislation passing, or who's going to be the next Prime Minister, or whatever it is, they'll come to our site and we'll have a very accurate set of probabilities in terms of our odds. And we can't really achieve that unless we have clever, clued up, informed people betting on these products and putting the prices as near to the correct probabilities as possible, if there are, even think about real probabilities in these kind of situations. So we are very reluctant to stop accounts like that, even if we think they're going to win money in the long term, if they're helping us discover the real price then we're prepared to pay a price for that. And actually, the profitability or otherwise of these markets is actually quite a long way down our list of priorities for these things. We're more about, as I say, providing something that could actually have some social utility.
Can political betting, follow on from that, do you think it can keep growing at this pace? Do you think that the next decade will do very well to match the last? But going forward, do you think it can continue to expand?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think there's certainly a big gap in the market for not just election betting, but on all sorts of other events and current affairs that's happening, which at the moment the betting industry doesn't do very well. Partly that's because it's probably not going to be very profitable for the operator. But also partly it's hard to find the expertise. It takes quite a lot of work to create these markets, to come up with rules that are relatively watertight and don't land you up with some ambiguous settlement situation, which will happen no matter how hard you try with these things. And so it seems like a big load of hassle for most operators for what would be a fairly niche part of their business. The good thing about Smarkets is that because the original idea of this company from Jason, who founded it, was that politics and current affairs would be a big part of it, and he's still really determined to make that happen. So we've got a lot of leeway to try and expand it as much as we possibly can.
And last but not least, just going on a bit of a tangent, but at the moment we're currently in the midst of a gambling review, and I'd be sort of remiss to ask somebody who's been at the heart of the industry whether you think reforms needed and what sort of reforms those would be.
I don't actually have a very strong opinion of that. I mean, I think just as a consumer myself, as somebody who bets, let's take one idea that's been floated of having a sort of monthly limit of how much you can deposit to a particular bookmaker or whatever it is. From the point of view someone who's likes to bet on elections, that's going to be very inconvenient because your overall spend may actually be very small over a long period of time, but it might be very concentrated in 1 month before a UK general election or something. So I'm rather hoping that doesn't happen just from a personal point of view. I don't know what Smarkets' submission has been to the Gambling Commission, so I couldn't comment on what this company thinks. I think it makes perfect sense to try and update the legislation to reflect that more people are betting online and so on. I mean, the other thing is that Smarkets doesn't operate casino products or virtual products, which I suspect may have more focus than sort of sports betting. I don't know. But no, I don't know which way that's going to go. I know some people had speculated with the previous minister in charge that it was likely to be slightly less bad for the betting industry than had been suspected. We've now got a new minister in charge of this thing, so I've got no idea what she thinks about it.
Thank you very much for your time in this part of Betting People. Matthew Shaddick.
Thanks.